Sometimes I think that my drawing practice began with my writing practice. Writing for many, many years, both my own writing, my poetry, my criticism, my life as an academic in the studies of literature. And then I began to understand the relationship between drawing and writing in a very profound way, acknowledging that language and the drawing language and the written language share the same gestures. And I began to take my pen to the page with the text of Virginia Woolf in the beginning. I would transcribe and transform parts of the text that I really was very moved emotionally by, and I needed to somehow transfigure them and make them mine in some unusual way. And I continued to investigate different writers, but also different ways of making marks and coming to the white page and allowing the work to accrue on its own terms, allowing it to be something that was not deliberated in advance. So my foray into drawing is as much about ink and the tools as it is about an empty space to fill, as it is about some kind of intellectual pursuit that I might be having. My work in Columbia University's classes, where I take notes in the form of drawings, is also a way to reimagine what I'm hearing, not to change it so much as to transfigure it and to give a visual analog to mental investigations. I think that my literary work and my love of philosophy and my love of art have somehow landed in the same place. They somehow have come to the page, sometimes as fragments, sometimes as wholes. Sometimes I try to work the characters I imagine in my life onto the page. And it's all experimental. It's all quite beautiful because in some ways there's no right or wrong. It's coming from the passions that I've grown up with, literature, music, art, and politics, to be honest, to try to address some kind of common ground, some kind of place of equity, some kind of reciprocity where we can engage in languages, written or otherwise, visual or otherwise. I think that's a lot of what my interests are. And lately I've been working a little bit towards other projects, collages that I do in honor of my ancestors who came from Aleppo, Syria. So I've been doing some collages of the migrants and the refugees and basically the people who are crossing and crossing and crossing and never arrive. It's a real interest of mine because I think that we're all implicated in that wandering. My heart is in drawing right now and in doing these different artworks. When I pick up a text I love, it always affects the way I draw. Lately it's been the works of Michel Foucault in the late lectures he gave at the Collège de France when he was dying of AIDS, and he gave lectures on the history of care and the history of how we as human beings have taken care of ourselves through the civilizations. He goes back to ancient Greek, and he studies the Greeks very intensely, very scholarly work, but also very emotional. And then he goes through to the current day, always questioning, how do we care for truth? How do we care for speech? How do we care for our souls, our bodies, and ultimately about how do we care for each other? And I invoke in those drawings one phrase, and the phrase is, take care of yourself, which Foucault attributes to Socrates, that being his last words before he died. And Foucault is interested in what he meant by care. What is the practice? What is the discipline? What is the daily practice of understanding what the word care means, what the practice of care means? And it's an emotional journey, but it's a beautiful one. And I feel like I've grown just by writing those words endlessly on the page, take care of yourself.